Chorus does not seek to provide a true simulation of spaceflight. It is a game, not a simulator, and as such it presents a gamified version of flight physics. Pitch is not inverted by default, and the complex relationship of yaw and roll when it comes to aircraft, a relationship we air lubbers often project onto spaceflight, is also simplified. There is no proper roll control. The spacecraft simply turns right or left along a plane that is periodically realigned with an arbitrarily imposed horizon. I appreciate, however, being able to turn off this automatic realignment. I feel more like I'm in space when I'm always at weird angles to the environment. It is possible to be at weird angles to these environments because they have defined tops and bottoms, and are largely laid out along the plane that they consider to be horizontal. They do make use of the vertical dimension, but not to the same extent as the other two. The environments look damn nice, though, and I found Chorus's flight model to be quite immersive for aesthetic reasons, as well as mechanical ones. It is an absolutely stunning video game, and the ships themselves are no exception. In particular, I would point out the slight movements in their flaps and nacelles as they respond to your inputs. It is a subtle aesthetic touch, but a powerful one. It connects you more directly to the ships, makes them feel more alive, and almost makes you forget about Newton for a while. It is fortunate that Chorus's ships look good, because you can't ever get out of them. Nara gets out and walks around for certain cutscenes, but you, as the player, do not. Similarly to Ace Combat and many racing games, the only thing you ever control is a vehicle. Chorus takes about 20 hours to finish if you do everything, and a little less than half of that is side content. Everspace and Everspace 2, games with some mechanical similarities, are both about 3 times as big. Those games have a multitude of flyable ships, crafting systems that feed off of collectible resources, and so on. Instead of all that, Chorus focuses its efforts around a much tighter story that takes place in only 6 explorable areas of varying size. It has progression systems, but they are added flavor instead of being central to the experience. The ship has slots for weapons and mods of increasing power that you will collect during your journey, and that's about it. More integrated with the story is the process of Nara unlocking more of her space magic abilities. You could call that a scripted progression system. So nothing detracts from the focus on the main story, and the side quests are no exception. Some of them are more independent, while others arc together into larger stories, but none of them feel unnecessary. There is not too much side content, less than half the experience, as I said, and to me it served as much needed breathing space between main story beats. There are some examples of what I will call bad game design, such as too many fail states or unclear objectives, but even the shittiest side quests still gets you to spend more time immersed in the world, which in turn increases your level of investment and makes the main story hit even harder. The purpose of side content, after all, is not to be high quality. It just needs to be the potatoes to the meat of the primary narrative, and you don't have to finish your potatoes. In addition to proper quests, there are random encounters that will spawn while you are cruising around, like this.
Pirates! Help! We're under heavy attack!
Almost there.
In a longer experience, these would get repetitive, but here they just serve as a way to disrupt your plans and make the world seem more alive. Chorus also tries to fill the emptiness of space with nearly non-stop chatter. Cutscenes are reserved for the main story, and they only ever show the main character, so dialogue is the only way for us to find out what's going on in other people's ships. In addition, Nara constantly whispers to herself in a way that will remind those who've played Control of Jesse's habit of interrupting conversations with her own internal monologue.
Perfect. This Naju tech could power the Enclave for years.
If the circle doesn't find us, I can still reach out with my right of senses and find them.
Like Jesse, Nara's whisperings largely concern her special and secret abilities. But unlike Jesse, she already knows exactly what it all means. After all, she is a veteran of the war that left this region in the state we find it, and she is no stranger to the space magic either. Her journey, then, is not one of discovery, but of rediscovery, remembrance, and atonement. After flying around in the adorable trash can doing some rudimentary but foreshadowing-laden quests for the people in this backwater place, the cult attacks. It is important to expose the player to just a bit of that status quo before it is threatened, so they have a reason to follow Nara across the threshold. She decides at this point that she can no longer hide from her past. Like John Wick digging his P-30Ls out of the basement floor, Nara goes to the place where she imprisoned a piece of her past 7 years ago. It is a sentient spacecraft, a friend but also a weapon, an unimaginably powerful weapon in the hands of an elder like her. This ship design is the ultimate upgrade. It seems to be working overtime to make up for the lack of any other options, like the coolness of 100 ship designs has been condensed into one. The central axis of the rest of the story is the relationship between Nara and her ship. He adds his own chatter to the mix, and the two of them do not always see eye to eye. At first, of course, he is upset about being locked up for 7 years. Seemingly the only thing that can get him to help is the promise of killing members of the cult, also known as the Circle. That should tell you all you need to know about his character. He is a weapon, after all. Chorus cannot be blamed for continuing the unrealistic legacy of early 20th century dogfights in space, and I would be hypocritical in criticizing something I have always loved. The tactics of tail chasing in a turning engagement, arguably already outmoded in the Second World War, are nevertheless inherently flashy, dramatic, and cinematic. Audiences love them, and so the F-14, capable of engaging up to 6 targets simultaneously at ranges exceeding 100 kilometers, instead becomes an overpriced, oversized, within visual range dogfighter. One of the hypothetical justifications I've heard for this in science fiction is the presence of an impenetrable soup of electronic countermeasures. If electronic warfare continues to develop to the point where there is too much electromagnetic noise in the battle space for anyone's radar to see anything, we may indeed find ourselves, once more, only able to fight within visual range. More direct defensive systems like energy shields could justify this as well. If spacecraft are able to take a lot of hits on their shields, then they may be able to close the range without being destroyed, similar to how full-plate armor largely negated the reach advantage of polearms. Fully armored knights could get past the spear points and ended up fighting it out in close quarters with poleaxes, maces, warhammers, and even daggers. So defensive systems, be they armor, shields, or ECMs, can allow for much closer engagement ranges. That still doesn't explain why the spaceships fly like airplanes, but these technologies are so far beyond our own that it doesn't really matter. If you accept the existence of space magic, artificial gravity, and faster-than-light travel, then you've kind of already told Newton to go fuck himself. Audiences today understand the mechanics of dogfighting, so it is actually what grounds the action for us, providing the baseline on top of which the more fantastical elements can emerge. For example, Nara's powers. They add even more flair to an already flashy conception of space combat. She can shock enemy ships, sending them tumbling out of control, ideally into a nearby obstacle. She can also just teleport onto a target's 6, which is quite useful in a classic dogfight. Those abilities use energy, though, and while that is recharging, things are more basic. The different weapon types also contribute to dynamic combat. The lasers are more effective against shields, the guns against hulls, and the unguided rockets the game calls missiles against armor. One of the coolest, but more basic abilities is probably more Newtonian than the regular flight. You can drift, continuing in a straight line at a constant speed while pivoting around to engage opponents that aren't in front of you. So between the different damage types, enemy types, and abilities, Chorus provides a genuinely engaging, interesting, and dynamic combat experience that seems to draw more from video games in general than from other dogfighters specifically. It's not a genre known for having meaningful enemy variety, different damage types, or big set-piece boss fights. Chorus has a few boss fights against these void entities known as the Faceless, who threaten the existence of our reality, and they are pretty cool. I have some issues with the game design here, but I don't think it is too challenging per se. The main challenge is just in keeping your tinfoil-plated ship alive. The design elements I dislike are unavoidable damage and invulnerable enemies. Both of those things must be used sparingly, and they have not been here. For example, certain turrets on the capital ships are straight up indestructible. This is not only unjustified and nonsensical, but also unnecessary. The turrets still pose a threat even if they are destructible, and the reward for taking them out is that it is easier to approach the ship and take out its core systems. It is up to the player, then, whether to carefully eliminate the turrets first, or to risk diving in for the money shot. Indestructible turrets accomplish nothing other than taking that choice away from the player, and that is no fun. So the Faceless are sort of reflections of humanity. Though their hellish reality is separate, for now, they feed off of everything that humanity suppresses. Guilt, fear, anger, hate, and so on. The Great Prophet, Nara's former mentor, was consumed by this darkness in his quest for Chorus. The key to defeating the Faceless is not in fighting them, but in accepting the darkness they feed off of as a part of yourself. Accepting that good and evil coexist within yourself and within every human robs them of their power. That is a perfectly sound philosophical argument, and even one that I agree with, but I didn't know that's what we were getting at until the game just came out and said it in the final cutscene. The problem here is that Nara's story, compelling as it is, was written without considering the player's place in it. We can intellectually understand her grief and guilt over blowing up Nimica Prime, but that is ancient history, and the player exists in the present. The only part of Nara's story that the player is involved in is her relationship with her ship, but that opportunity is squandered. Whatever it is she realizes about him before deciding to merge into the One either went over my head or doesn't make any sense to begin with. The Pathless's ending considers the value in finding your own path to truth, a uniquely powerful concept if you've just forged your own way through a truly directionless open world. In Death's Door, you experience death many times before you actually meet him, in an ending that explores the meaning and importance of death. The ending of the Plague Tale duology finally puts to rest the creeping doubt of the unasked question, at what cost? In Chorus, there is no such arc for the player to have a stake in, and as a result, the overstated themes of the ending come out of nowhere and fall on deaf ears. But hey, it's a good enough plot for a decent action movie, and that is all that Chorus is trying to be. It leans hard on its action, and its action is more than capable of taking the weight.